Okay, the stage is yours.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Well, hey everybody. I'm Kasper. Used to be on a Rails core team, and today I'm going to talk about a few gems I've written and been working on for a while, and just showing them off for a bit, and then I'll probably take some questions if there's anybody that wants to ask anything. So let's see, and then I gotta find a share screen button. Oh, host disabled participant screen sharing. Can I?
Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. The
Yeah.
Zoom changed whole UI and
Yeah.
yes, holy shit. Okay. Yes, advanced options. All part. Yeah, I guess you have the allows now.
Okay. Yeah. This looks like it. Let's see. We can probably start with this one. Can we share snaps? The shifts like multiple windows. It's probably just good for now. Okay. See that one. So this is let's start here. Okay, then Zoom just took out my screen with a bunch of UI. Can you let's see. Here we
We
go.
can see it.
Okay. Yeah, you can see it. I just need
Yeah.
to move some stuff around so I can also read what's going on. So that's good. Okay, let's see if we do this actually. That might be easier for me. Okay, I think that's good. Cool. So the first thing I've been working on is called ActiveRecord Associated Object. The idea is, well, let's scroll down. So the idea is that as the Rails applications grow, it becomes a little bit difficult to figure out where you want to put things. And so one of the responses has been to use service objects where you get like an app services directory and start throwing things in there. But then sometimes what can happen is that it can kind of, just like an app models directory with active records and other portals in there can kind of get a little bit junky sometimes. That can also become a junk drawer. So what I'm trying to do is kind of take that head on in a way and try to do something a little bit different, but not in a way that's so overt that you need to convert your whole app to use and always use this or whatever. It's just one thing to help you tease out these collaborator objects, as I call them, for your active record models. So they're for the most part plain old Ruby objects, but then you just sort of require that you associate it with active record models. So here, for instance, you have a post, here's from application record, and then what you can do with that is then within the post namespace, have an extra file in here that you then inherit from this active record associated object for it. And then part of what that gives you is a namespace automatically. So your app's starting to hopefully be a little bit more organized. And then you can throw any dependent logic in here. And this publisher has access to the post. And then what you want to do after you've done that is hop back into the post and then declare that it's there. And I'll just give you a post.publisher. Let's see. And then this is a little bit of explainer for that, what it works behind the scenes essentially, but we don't really need to get into that for right now. And there's some more stuff about what we can do with how to name things and pluralization there, I think. What else is valid? Let's look more what it actually does. So within this, now we can rely on the post itself. So for instance, you could take and then define, you have a publisher, and maybe it makes sense to them that it defines handling how to publish this post in like a blogging system. So you have access to just calling transaction, which delegates to the post essentially. And then you can do other stuff where you want to muck with the post itself. But the idea being that now you're encapsulating a slightly more tightly scoped name to just a part of the app, as opposed to also littering it in with the post itself. I think I can say this depending on when this goes out on YouTube. Someone else has been trying to use this for, I heard from a few people that have been using this for their billing and entitlements and so forth, and how to split those things up. And they've been using this gem to essentially help them carve out and give it a slightly nicer namespace API for some of the things they're doing to organize the code itself. It's not required for the work they were doing, but it was a kind of easy fit. So let's see, there's the generator we ship with as well to help set them up correctly, kind of. Let's see, there's something else I feel like I wanted to show, but it's kind of, where is it running from? Let's see, what is it? There's something else I feel like I'm missing here, but maybe I just read me. Let's start. Okay, let's just take it from the next part. So the other thing I wanted to try to experiment with is, like, I know, there's mixed feelings on callbacks or whatever. I just thought it was interesting once having this declaration that you could then do more stuff with that. Because one of the things I like about this is to try to have, I want more bang for my buck essentially. So when a gem comes in and sets up a little bit of an extra convention on top of Rails, I want to get more out of following that essentially, which here means that you could also pass these callbacks along, for instance. So we want to make sure that this after create commit just calls publish, and we want to make sure we always do that on the post. I mean, you could do that, for instance, and this is what it would look like. You could also, from within one of these delegated callbacks, to throw abort. So you can, abort if you need to, based on, I guess, whatever business rules you want. Let's see. Yeah, you could also extend. So part is this also springing out of what some people have been doing, which is a convention of, let's see if I'm actually showing it here, where you take some sort of name and wrap it in a concern. And then you do all this included stuff, you do these class methods, and then you can also add your instance methods there. And then you include this within the post up here. But then with associated object, what you could do is instead have this one. So what people are trying to do with these concerns is they're wrapping a bunch of methods to help them make the integration layer between some behavior they have and then the hosting object, which in this case is the post. And that can be fine, but then when you're mixing in another Poro, essentially, suddenly we have two different files to find a behavior. And so what we're trying to do with this extension method is it's mostly just syntactic sugar, essentially, for this. But now it means that you only have to look in one file. And so has object, basically, this declaration just equally loads the class, which means that then we'll be executing this block. And then the post itself is extended with all these methods. So you have one less file to look into instead of also wrapping with a concern. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of doing a lot of different things. So part of the benefits here is that you don't need to have a naming convention for concerns and where to place them. Look up to two files to read the feature, the concern and the associated object, or wrap integrating code in like the whole included block. You kind of spare doing that into just one block, essentially. Same thing with the class message. You don't need to wrap that either. So you kind of need to know a little bit less about Ruby's module hierarchy. Same thing with this extend ActiveRecord concern. You don't need that either. So it saves you a little bit of boilerplate, essentially. And the primary goal we're trying to do with this is adding this kind of soft convention in a way to give you more organization. That's primarily the main benefit, kind of, and trying to enforce people to use namespacing to see what that would do for their app and like their object hierarchy, essentially. Let's see. And then Nate here is a person who's been using this gem, and they're also talking about another thing. I don't think we'll be covering that gem today, but this is what they've been running into, is they are running associated object in 3 spots in production so far. It mastered improved how I was architecting a new feature. I put a PR for review, and a coworker logged how I organized and easy to follow. The large PR was because of those 2 gems. I'm now working on another PR app where I'm using them again. I keep seeing use cases for them now. I love it. Thank you for these gems, blah, blah, blah. So recommend checking it out. And then I follow up with them later, and it was still holding up for them. And they've added 4 more associated objects. This was a while back, so they must have been doing more because I think they're still using it. It's like a 1.12 point superpower. I'm a bit surprised this isn't Rails core, to be honest. I want to migrate some more code over to this. Feels more organized and sane for them. There's stuff with the jobs folder, but we won't be covering that right now. There's the other code. Let's skip that over. You test it kind of similar to what you do with anything else. You sort of borrow an ActiveRecord and then you call this method on it. That's the concession you're making, that it's kind of tied to that ActiveRecord. But then the next part you can get is we're essentially implementing global ID identification, that's called, which is what ActiveRecord implements, which is how, if you use active job, that you don't need to do post.find. Because it's serialized into this global ID, active job will know how to like serialize the object and then pull it back out. And through that, you can basically pass these poros to jobs. So the way that this works is, let's see here, I'm explaining it here. So basically, because you can do post.find one, you could basically do post publisher.find one. So we're using the same post ID and the same post class, so use that as like the lookup. But then we're extending it with an extra constant in there, which means that we can then find that object. So I hope that makes sense. So we're reusing, post.find.publisher. We're reusing that lookup capability, essentially. And then I'm explaining this other gem I've been working on too, ActiveJob Performs. I don't think we'll go too much into this, but the idea is basically that since we have global ID support, you can then generate these jobs based on that, because we just pass this poro into a job. And so you could generate methods like these essentially and have these be generating jobs. And you can see this is all the stuff that it ends up generating. So because we have this extra convention, we can generate a little bit more essentially and remove some more boilerplate if we want to. And then there's a whole more about what the stem does in there. The second part that's relying on the same idea, because of this post ID and the post namespace, and then we just stitch the extra namespace in here, is we can also have automatic credit support. So let's see, lost my train of thought here, but the idea is basically that now we have this convention for the namespace and borrowing the post ID, we can have uniqueness. So we can do this kind of stuff and know we'll find the right poro essentially, and give some of this like built-in features to, things like credits or like global ID. So we get more, again, more bang for your buck when you're writing code and following this pattern. If you want to, it's optional to use something like this, or the job support is just kind of there so that you're following like the right thing in terms of if you're following this pattern. Yeah, it's the same feature set. We are borrowing the post and the ID for that. And here's just showing that we also work with like namespace models. If you have an object rating here and then post comment rating, descend down into that same name convention. Let's see, same way of testing it as well. We do support custom composite primary keys. Actually, it's a new feature where primary keys can now be like an array, so it's a little bit different to work with it, but it's the same deal essentially. We also support that. Cool. I think that's sort of the whole walkthrough of the README. I was wondering if we should jump into some of the code, but I'm curious if anybody has any questions or something. This is kind of like a high level overview. Yeah. Cool. Let's jump into the code. So, or maybe we should actually start and say, so this is just a regular gem. There's nothing particularly special in here. Most gems just have like a gem spec. We just declare a few things and give it us, Ruby version, all that stuff. And then most gems have a lib and test directory. That's it. Just if people aren't used to jumping into gems and so forth, I'll just explain a little bit as we go. And then hopping to lib, and it'll just be loading in here, ActiveRecord associated object. And this is pretty much it. So this is for the most part, most of the code kind of. So it's fairly metaprogramming heavy, but I'm just hooking into inherited, which is a Ruby hook. So when you inherit from this object, we're declaring a few things onto the like post publisher, for instance. So this is a Rails method, module parent, which means that from the post publisher, we can get the post class itself. And here we can get the post name, and then we can underscore. So we could do like generate the post method on this thing. So you could do publisher.post, and that's how we get the like bidirectional. So you can go back and forth if you wanted to. And then we're using some somewhat, I guess, simple methods, I guess. Here's the extension block I was showing earlier. We just have this record class, which again refers back to the post, doing a class eval there. And here's where we're doing, let's see, we're doing respond to there. Yep. And then we're doing a method missing here as well. Let's see. Some of these things were just for convenience, essentially. I don't quite remember. Method missing is kind of a little bit obtuse here, but this is how we're implementing the where method to support global ID. That's kind of it. And we're just yanking them out. So this is like post.map publisher, and then we extract all of those. Or if it's a single one, we just extract that from that one. So that's kind of what we're doing. Let's see, and yeah, we take the record. So this would be the post itself. That's kind of it. Let's see. Yeah, that's sort of it for this stuff. Let's see. The other thing you might want to do, let's go back actually. So this is typical what you'd see in like a gem that extends Rails, is this line where you're checking whether or not you've defined this Rails rail tie, and you load an optional class essentially. And what this rail tie does is then instructing how we want to tie into Rails itself. So you inherit from this rail tie, define your own, and then you can do some extra stuff if you want to. So this is how we're adding in the automatic credits and global ID support. We've already declared the pillars you saw with the method missing hook and the other one with the ID. And this is just where we're automatically inserting, so people don't have to do it in their apps. It's like, hey, we know that we support these things. Same thing with how we're extending this active job performs rather. And then it's the other thing we haven't looked at yet, this object association. This is where that has object method comes from. We can look at that now. See. So this is also kind of a little bit tricky, but has object here, I'm using an inline. Anybody used refinements before? So part of what I do when I do these gems is also experiment with a bunch of Ruby syntax, and I kind of have a little bit of fun with it since it's not in a production app. So it's kind of exploring, seeing what is, I wouldn't get to use a refinement at my day job, and you kind of maybe shouldn't. But here it makes more sense. So the fact that we're using here, if we're using these like braces to define the block, it means that I don't need to wrap like parents around the module.new call, and the block will go to module.new as opposed to the using call. That's how that works. And then within this call, we can then do a refine on module itself to add this method here. And that's how we can, within the hasObject method, use this method to then help us extend the source a little bit easier, more easily in a way. Yeah. And then we're using it again here we're kind of composing a method that we're adding onto your object based on these like strings we're passing back essentially. Yeah, I hope that makes sense, but that's kind of what we're doing. You can see it up here, class eval passing these source chunks that we're passing through this block, which is the block that we're passing here and then also here. So that's kind of how that works. And making sure that we're declaring the right files and line number. So if you do like post.method publisher, it will point back to that has object call that you had. Hope that makes sense, but it's a little bit, most people don't need to do this sort of stuff with call locations and so forth. What we're doing here is we're plucking out a frame on the stack that's just above us, so we know where it's called from. Yeah, that's kind of what's going on here. If you haven't seen metaprogramming before, maybe it's a little bit difficult, I'm not sure, but that's kind of the gist of it essentially. Yeah. Any questions so far? Or like confusions, or you can type it out in chat too if that's easier. I can try to how do I see that actually? Let's see. Okay, I can find it there. Yeah, makes sense. But it does. Cool. Otherwise, I think we might. Should we hop onto Oaken, or is there something else I want to show in here? Let me check the test directory. If there's anything I need to show. Let's see. Let's see, fairly simple here. We're just doing some setup to make some of these things work. Setting up the active job as well. Clearing out all the stuff we put into credits, if anything. Doing a bunch of these integration tests. Yeah. Let's see. Boot. Oh yeah. Oh, if you've never seen this before, by the way, here's how you can set up ActiveRecord like in an inline script. So you can use this if you want to test something out as well, where you can connect to a SQLite tree adapter and then pass it in a memory database. So you don't have to worry about creating whatever, like you can define a schema in line, which is what we're doing here. And you can set up the logger as well if you want to, and then you just have the whole schema logs put out when you run the test as well. That's kind of it in a way. So you can define this, and then you can inherit from these things down below. I'm setting up an application here just to make it a little bit more like an app. And then that's what we're doing here. But where this is all in memory, like it's a database in memory essentially, but it's really helpful for these kind of scripts. So you don't have to muck around with like an extra like DB schema file or something like that, or have to migrate or anything like that. You could just define it in line, it'll be loaded up in memory, but you can still do all the updates, creates and finds and so forth. But this is what it looks like. It's in the test boot ActiveRecord if you end up going to the gem kind of. So let's see. Is there anything else I want to show in test? Maybe. We have the generator still as well, but I kind of don't care about that right now. Yeah, and then we're just testing a bunch of stuff that method passing and all that stuff works, and we will end up finding the same object that we declared up here, I guess, through this method, that they all return the same thing. So yeah, that's kind of some of that. Suspension, pass-through. Oh, okay, there's an old comment here. I don't remember that part to do. It's always like that. Let's see. Global ID, yeah, this is what it looks like when you pass the global ID. So if you have an ActiveRecord, you could do the same thing. You do post.toGID and it'll look, I mean, you won't have the publisher in there, but it'll look the same pretty much. And that's how active job works. It'll find those and it'll locate based on this GID string essentially. Let's see. Anything else? Just checking that the methods work as well. Yeah. I feel like it's fairly standard so far. Anything else I need to look at? Source location. Yeah, we're just taking that it points to the right file. Essentially, I don't want to bother with the line. If anybody changes it, that's a little bit too much. But does it point to the right file? I'm just checking. Okay, hopefully that means that we're also on the right line. But yeah. Cool. Cool. Maybe we look at the generator real quick as well. Generators. So I think this is pretty much just built into Rails, that the way that it loads generators, so look in lib/generator/associated. So you could do bin/Rails generate associated, and then you can pass it an argument, I think, yeah, an argument for a name, and it will help generate some of these files for you. So you can sort of, or you can also generate that hash object, of course, so you don't need to worry about that. See, I think that's kind of it. Anything else you want to see in the templates directory? Yeah, just fairly simple stuff just to help set it up a little bit. So to test, yeah, just simple things kind of. Cool. That's kind of, I think this is kind of that gem and how it works. So it's not a ton of code to kind of set this stuff up. I guess the generator is almost half of it in a way. But yeah, kind of metaprogramming and so forth, but because it's set up with these conventions in place, it's not necessarily so difficult, and it's not super difficult to maintain either. I haven't had to do a ton of versions, and most of the changes have been, the core of it has stayed the same. I've just added a few extra things. I don't remember what it was, but yeah, 47 lines of code to some of the stuff. So yeah, fairly dependable in that sense. Cool. Any questions? Or we'll hop on
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question, Kasper?
Yeah.
Can we use it on other frameworks like Sinatra?
Probably if you're using ActiveRecord, yeah.
Yeah, but I saw the generator. It start with bin Rails generate associated, or
Yeah.
have we add Rails to our Sinatra project as well?
I don't think so, because I think the generator itself is just loaded by Rails. I'm not loading it in here, and I don't think I'm loading it anywhere else. So it means you can't use the generator, but because that's exclusive to Rails. But I think if you're just using ActiveRecord, that's kind of what I require. But to know the interface is the same. But yeah.
Yeah, I see.
So if you're using ActiveRecord in your Sinatra app, I think it should work. I haven't tried it, but it should be fairly easy to try out, actually. Bundle add ActiveRecord associated object, and we'll find out pretty quickly whether or not it'll work or not. I think everything should work. Yeah, if you're using ActiveRecord, I got that set up in there. So
thanks.
So yeah, cool.
I have one. Like, have you seen an example, like a live example which makes you, say like, oh, this is like a misusage of this pattern basically, and you should use, stick with the services or stick with the concerns. Have you ever seen like, too much for this gem to handle itself?
Not yet. No, it's kind of still early days in a way. I think, and the other thing too is this is not meant to be the only way. So if people still want to use services or whatever, this is just like an extra tool in the toolbox essentially that I think can help shore up some things and know where to place them. But it's not incompatible with services. If people still want to use it for like the things that touch multiple models or things like that, that's also totally fine. Because I think it's still fairly lightweight, so it's sort of easy enough to see where it kind of transgresses or things like that. But yeah, for sure, it could possibly go very, very wrong. I'm not sure. I haven't heard about that yet, but depends on more people using it, I think. So yeah, if anybody wants to try it and just like completely like overdo it, by all means. I did hear from somebody else that was using it. I was using it for quite a bit, where there was another developer that was originally kind of hesitant about adopting. It was like, couldn't this just be a poor or a concern? But then they ended up trying it out and then being completely converted because it added a few extra things for them and putting that convention in place, as opposed to doing the manual Poro boilerplate was kind of simpler, because part of it is also, again, there's not so much code here. The main point is almost like just having this concept name of knowing what an associated object is, because then you can when you're writing new features, it becomes a little bit easier. Oh, this could be where an associated object lives or something like that. So you have an extra tool in your like mind or whatever to decompose features or other code you have essentially, as opposed to just like a pour or something, because that could be kind of a lot of different things. So just a service object can also be a ton of different things, but this is kind of trying to be a little bit more scoped in that sense. But yeah, see, I've got to sneeze, hold on. Almost there, I guess. Okay, cool. See, I think let's hop on to the other one then. Where am I at? Let's see. Okay. So the other game I've been working on is called Oaken, which is a little bit more ambitious. So Associated Object is a little bit more scoped in a way. Oaken tries to kind of see what if there's something different than fixtures and factories, and trying to take like a new approach to all this stuff, both for the development scenes that we have, but then also for the test data we're using in like, testing essentially. So I think a lot of people are kind of familiar with fixtures and factories, maybe. I don't know if should I explain any of them, just like giving a rough like sense of what they are. See, is there anything I actually want to show in the just scrolling through, because GitHub renders the README a little bit nicer than my my own window. Let's see. I'm just gonna switch to my editor instead. Here it is. Share this instead. Okay, cool. So go away, Zoom. I need my I need the rest of my screen, please. I'm on a laptop here. There we go. Okay. Let's see. Open something up here. Maybe buy this a little bit. Cool. And let's sort this stuff. Oh, that's some. Oh, that's like parallelization. Okay, cool. That's not our way here. Cool. Yeah. Cool. What else do I want to look at? So what I wanted to show was in here, actually. Yeah, we got our test fixtures. So I have a test set up here with fixtures in them, just to sort of, we also have a generator here that will actually convert fixtures into what Oaken does. So let's start with what fixtures are here, just to give a basic case. So typically what fixtures look like is kind of like this, where you have a file that looks, it's just in test fixtures. Ignore the test dummy thing, that's just Rails engines and how you test them. But test fixtures last accounts.yaml, for instance, would have however many accounts you have and then whatever attributes they have. They look like this. Next association, probably the users thing. You have a few in there as well, and then they connect back to the account somehow and give it a name or some more attributes as well, and probably like 20, 30 lines for all the YAML to do that part. Another association, let's see, actually expect this one in menus now. We just have a donuts one on this account. Cool. Okay, let's go to the next one. In here, we have a menu item. I have a few items in there. They belong to this menu. That's the donuts menu we just saw. Okay, fair enough. Let's hop over to anything else I added in here. I think that's kind of what I added for right now. So what happens for fixtures is you have these files that, and they're kind of in this like in-between space where there's this YAML that gets converted and just like set straight to the database. So one of the issues that people sometimes have with fixtures is that there's no callbacks. So if they're actually writing callbacks or whatever into active records, and there's advice to not use the one, but if people are, then fixtures don't help them with that because they have to rewrite it manually and put it into the setting database. So sometimes that mismatch gets a little bit difficult to work with. And then the other part is also, we just saw here, there's like 4 or 5 associations, but then there's 4 or 5 files with not a lot of content in them. Like most of the files right now is kind of simple. And of course, in a real app, it'll grow a little bit more and so forth. And it'll become unwieldy because maybe you have like several accounts where you have multiple different things. So it's all intermingled into one file. So it becomes really difficult to figure out where do we organize these, or how do we deal with all this like complexities as things grow. So, but one thing that is nice about fixtures is they're kind of fast because they're preloaded before our tests. So they're just like grouped up and they're just sent to the database, like with a few queries as possible kind of. So that's kind of nice in that sense. And in that initial cost, you kind of recoup that because you have a stable data set that you're working with through your test. So it kind of makes sense that so you kind of like use the app or learn the main model a little bit more. It makes sense. Oh, we have this Kasper Donuts account and it has this Kasper user on it that I know how to use and access to. And that's kind of what I need for most of my tests. I just need to sign in as this Kasper person, whatever. And then that's kind of what I'm doing. Because the alternative I tried with is also with factories. I worked on a system use fixtures and I worked on a system use factories as well. And my difficulty with factories was that they were kind of optimized for isolation, whereas like fixtures are kind of about the storytelling thing, but they're kind of ironically a little bit bad at it, like we just seen, where it's just like jumping to all these files and I have to reconstruct everything for myself, and then it's like, what are we doing? But at the best case, they can kind of give you some names to some of these things that help you understand how your object graph works. Oh, this is actually my Rails app, and it connects in these ways, and it has accounts, and there's a little mom and pop shop or whatever, runs a donut store, whatever it is. That's the nice case about it. But then with factories, they're kind of on the other side of things, where they're trying to be almost really anonymous, where all the data is kind of generated of, everything's like these like fake names, or none of it's really tied together. It's all like generated on the fly, which is kind of nice in some ways because of some of the issues you can run into with fixtures, that you want something that's more ad hoc. But then the difficulty there, and what I found was, yeah, I could get a test to pass, but I had to kind of wire 4 or 5 different factories together, and I don't know if I did it correctly. And then both factories and fixtures have this discoverability problem, where as things grow, it becomes more difficult to figure out, do I need to add anything new to this place, or do I need to update something, or do I need to add something in a different place? Like, where do I go with this stuff? Does this belong to the existing factory, or do I need something new, or how do I actually work with this stuff over time? So there's a lot here that's kind of, and I think, fixtures has been Rails' default since forever. And I don't know how many people kind of use it. Some people kind of use it in a little bit. And then factories have also been kind of around since forever. They're kind of a mainstay idea, but so not a ton of stuff has been happening on these fronts, I don't think, for a while. So let me hop back to the browser because it renders a little bit nicer. Let's see. Here, yeah. So my take is kind of based on having worked on systems that use both factories and fixtures, and trying to see, is there something else we could kind of do here? The other thing that we're also doing in apps a lot of the time is like working with database seeds for development and setting that up. And so sometimes what I've experienced is, wait, there's both seeds and also these fixtures that are kind of a little bit similar. And sometimes you want to almost use some of the fixture data you have to also seed your database. That's been my experience at least, where it's like you're doing something that's kind of similar, but you can't really share them. It's like cumbersome to do that. So let's see. I guess we're going through some of this stuff. See, I don't really think so. Let's just start up here. So what we're trying to do instead is kind of start from the seeds case and then leveling those up and then using them for tests as well. So what it looks like is you'd head into db/seeds therapy, and then you'd do this. You'd say open up prepare, and then here you could do seeding the accounts, and then also this data. We'll get back to that. So now we'll look for deeply nested files to load in this db seeds directory, and then also within the current environment. So you could, for instance, have so right now, let's look at this file. So just the file name. So right now, when we call seed accounts, we're going to be looking for everything beneath this accounts directory, or everything beneath the current environment's accounts directory. So you could also split this up for just development or just test if you didn't want to share anything. But right now, this is sort of in the shared directory. So this would be loaded in both development and test. So here's what it looks like instead. So those files that we just had to go through 4 or 5 different files to look at, they're kind of all bundled in here, like this, where you can set up the account first, and then when you give it a name, like the symbol here, you can then use that in tests. You could say accounts.Kasper's Donuts to access this, or users.Kasper to access it in your test, essentially. And we're doing kind of the same thing, where we're setting it up, and because we're not in YAML anymore, we could also do things on like one line, which I kind of like doing, because like, I just want to see the statement, and I just want to see how this compares, like this user compares with the next user, so it's easy to spot the difference. Oh, we're sharing the accounts, the same thing, the different name. So okay, it makes sense to me. We're setting up the menu. Now we don't need to give it a name because we're creating ActiveRecords here. So which also means we're running callbacks. So it helps with that as well. And then the menu here, we could pass it in directly. We don't have to give it like a donuts name like we did in the fixtures call. Set up an extra like user here for how do we access the system, generate some orders here, some bogus ones, and that's kind of it in a way. And then we're also doing this, like trying to add a few more conventions here as well, where we both have this shared directory. That's kind of, I actually completely forgot to talk about this. Is kind of a major thing where and neither fixtures or factories kind of have this, but what we're trying to do is group around this root level model where everything else kind of stems from. So it's usually like an account or a team or an organization where it's like the system can't exist without this model in there, and everything else like starts holding on to that. Like you can see here, we're setting up the account first, and then we're setting up all the users on this account. That's it. And then from there, we can then go further and then add, now we can add the menu, and now we can add another user that's then going to purchase some of these. That's kind of the way to look at it. So these files are kind of more like your config routes file, where it's going to be a little bit longer vertically, but everything's kind of grouped together, and you have a sense of where things start and like, oh, this is what's needed for my object graph to actually work. It goes in this order, where with fixtures and factories, that can be kind of tough to trace around and figure out how does actually connect and what's to what, and you can't really do it because you have to keep a lot in your head. And here you can kind of just see it in the file, similar to what you do in the routes file. So next up, we're trying to add this extra connection with this data directory as well, where there's these tables that aren't really connected to anything else. I mean, it is, but they're kind of more just straight up like data tables, like a plans, for instance, where you just want to have a title and maybe give it a pricing for something that you're just offering this plan in your system, but it's not quite connected to anything else. We just want the data to be there. And those also, we haven't done this quite yet, but we're still looking at it, where this kind of data stuff could also be the thing that you want to have in production. So you could run this and make sure that the same data is like percolated and updated in production as well to this like upsert thing. It's still early days for that and figure out whether or not this is a good idea or not, because it's, potentially a little bit risky. So see, cool. And then we're just following the conventions here. So now you could do bin rails db seed and bin rails db seed replant. A replant will just truncate the whole database and wipe everything, and you start from scratch and add it again. That's kind of it. So let's see, there's actually a typo here, there's S here. But part of what we're doing here is also you do dbc/test/cases if you have a specific case file that you want for just a few tests or whatnot, and then you can use them later on. I think we're showing that. Another thing we're looking at is also adding defaults. You can assign these broad global defaults. So if any column has a name, they'll automatically use this. So if you don't care about adding every like default through the hierarchy, was like, I don't really care about this. It just needs to be there. I don't want to give it a specific value, and it kind of ruins what it is I'm trying to say within my C's file. Well, now you can set a default here or on a specific thing. Like if you know that, an account is really a more specific name, so it needs more of a business name than a person name. So you could kind of tweak it like this if you want to. That's kind of part of it as well, where we're trying to give a place where you can set some of these things. People have been doing this kind of stuff with fixtures as well, where they have like this whole YAML syntax you can use to capture something, and then you can like extend something, and it's just with these defaults, and it's also a little bit difficult too. So yeah. And then we also have an RSpec. Yeah, okay, it's here. It requires this Oaken RSpec setup. And then for a mini test, we got this, and it works with Rails' test parallelization as well. We checked that. So see, and then tests have access to the accounts like Kasper's donors and users like Kasper, for instance, that were set up in the data scripts. There's a little bit of recommendation for using like one-off tests. This is where it loads that cases, for instance, the one single case for like a pagination test where you're loading more records or whatnot. But ship with a fixtures converter. That's it. See development as well. Well, that's kind of just all. Well, okay, that's just supported by some people. That was nice to support. That's cool. Okay, any questions? Should we jump into the code? Sounds good. Okay, let's see. And again, similar gem spec, all the standard files here: change slug, code of conduct, gem file, license, MIT license. They're both MIT license gems. The test dummy is kind of a Rails. So this is a Rails engine, I think. Maybe it is, or maybe it isn't. I don't remember actually. We'll find out pretty soon. Let's see. Maybe it's just a rail tie. Yeah, it's just a rail tie. So it's not quite an engine. So there's a difference between if you just add a gem that wants to do something with Rails, typically you ship these rail ties, but you can also ship an entire Rails engine where you can have your own, where your engine can then have an app directory and controllers and models. Like Device is an engine, which is why it can stand up like extra routes, like sign, whatever, it has these, or ship these like sessions controller or like the password reset flow. Device can ship all that stuff because that's what engines let you do. For instance, let's see, jump back. So this is the main loading part we'll do. There's a bunch of stuff in here. Again, not super much in here. It's just setting some things up. Let's see. Seeds, the test setup we talked about before, the seeds themselves. There's something we're looking at here. Let's see. Lookup pass. Here's what we're doing. I think it's in the rail tile where we're just putting the Rails environment onto this thing. So basically, we're just having these. Let's see. We're not doing it in here. Where's that being used in? Let's see. I don't remember. It's been a while since I looked at some of the stuff. Okay, we're seeding all these. We're loading all these files within transactions. So if anything happens, we can like revert or whatnot, which might be a little bit helpful for the things. Let's see. Cool. Again, similar to what we did in the associated object gem, we're loading the rail tie if there is define one. I guess it's a little bit silly here because this doesn't work outside of Rails. So it's kind of, I guess I guess I should just require it. Yeah, okay, cool. Let's see, maybe start with the rail tie then. Yeah, so we're setting up these lookup paths, and here's where we're passing in that part with the extra Rails environment for how to find all the extra files based on that environment. So you both find the global ones in db/seeds and then the per environment ones. Cool. Let's see, what do we want to look at? Seeds probably is the best place. Here's where we set up the thing with the defaults. It's a little bit wonky. I kind of like this Ruby syntax with these endless methods. People kind of don't like it as well, but again, for me, this is just my personal project. I'm kind of trying to go a little bit nuts with some of the syntax and see how that feels, just to see what it looks like, and maybe even to make myself go, oh, I don't know if I like that, but then just for fun, see what it feels like. Another method missing hook, here's how we define the accounts and so forth. It's a little complex because we're doing some more stuff in here. But yeah, so this is how we define these accounts. And the reason I want to do these, some people are asking me, why not just do straight up active record calls in the seed files, which you can totally do. It's just more, I like having it look a little bit different. So you're aware you're not quite within the whole active record thing. And that's also how you can do things like the defaults and setting them up as well. So you get some of those, again, more bang for your buck, essentially. If you follow these conventions, you get a little bit more out of it as opposed to straight up active record in a way where we don't have as much control. So see the register thing, it's all auto registry these days, so you don't really need to worry about that. That's just more how it works with the registering like the account internally and mapping it to an active record model. Here's how you load a specific seed file. Here's where those lookup paths come in, where you just I guess you can pass multiple different directories kind of, and then for each of those, we try to load from that. So a little bit difficult here. Load from, adding a new loader and loading it onto this self here is just this module. So that's how we're defining all these methods, like accounts, for instance. That's a specific thing. We haven't talked about this at all. This is an experiment I've been trying where, a lot of Ruby code bases where people are doing comments for things like, oh, here's where the association start or whatever, or like, here's the new thing and the old one ends. But I'm kind of like, well, Ruby's just an expressive language that I think is a little bit of a shame if we're just doing everything within comments because it's kind of tough to work with. So I've been exploring just having this section method that kind of just leverages what Ruby can do, like Ruby's method syntax and all the stuff you can do in methods, method signatures, and then also yielding a block. So what it lets you do is set up things like these, where you can do this stuff that's a little bit more self-documenting to carve up your file into specific sections. So here's the one we just call groups, for instance. But then we can also just pass a block because we just set this, we can just yield, but you can also do it deeply nested if you wanted to. So it lets you try to carve up a file in a way that's hopefully makes a little bit more sense to either indent a little bit more if you want to or something, but trying to make it a little bit, since they're running a little bit longer, trying to make it easier to figure out what's going on. But it's up to people to figure out how to use that. But it's just, the code was so simple and it's just leveraging all the stuff that Ruby can do in their method signatures. So, you could give it key values as well, or just like give it a hash for something, just something specific. I think I'm doing that in one of the tests to see what that would look like. Let's see. Cool. We should jump into that. So I'll show what it looks like. Again, test dummy here. Let's see, DB seeds. Yeah. So we're setting some things up. Get some global default. Some of this is just for testing, so it looks a little bit more gnarly than it maybe needs to. I know a lot of people in their factory bots, they set up things like counters. So I was trying to see what that would look like here. I don't know if I like it exactly, but just trying to play around with it. Another thing we got, which is also kind of wonky, anybody know about Ruby singleton methods? Well, you're actually seeing them here. Let me jump back to the code base to show you what they are here. Okay, let's jump back into, where was I? What was that before? Oh, the other one. Let's see, DVC is there. Okay, bring it to this. DVC is here. So here we are in here. Let's see. So what is actually going on with these methods here is you can do this. Oh, I know there's a typo. And then, so Ruby lets you add methods to like an individual instance of an object, and they're called singleton methods. So we're kind of using those here. So users here is an instance of a class. We can look at that too. And then we can override its create method. And because singleton methods, you can actually call super to get the actual method as well. So that's kind of what we're doing, to just assign this like unique by default here. To get into that as well. So it's a little bit uncommon, but it's a way to get access to some factory-like helpers if you need to set up some more things, but kind of doing it a little bit in line. So a lot of this is still experimental and figure out how does it actually feel and so forth. I kind of like how wild this is in a way, that it kind of just works and it's just sort of Ruby that lets you do these kind of things. So again, that's my take on trying to explore these things and seeing what comes out of it, and then let people decide whether or not they like it or whatnot, you know. So yeah, let's see anything else I want to look at or show right now. Yeah, here's the one again, trying to play with these like sections. And because this is the free method signature, we could do kind of whatever if you want to. Let's see, there's a few more things in here that wasn't the README, but I think that's just for testing. Trying to set up an extra account to see what that looks like. One of the things I want to add at some point is, this is why there's a demo account in here as well. It's just trying to make it easier for people to set up some demo data for like marketing, so that they could even sign in production and want to play around with something. Or you could have like a Capybara based suite that could run based on this demo account, and then take automatic screenshots that you could then do stuff with or send to like a publishing pipeline and then have it like auto updated or something like that. So that's some of the other things we're looking at. I haven't gotten to any of that yet, but the stuff is kind of mostly there to be able to start setting some of that up and playing around with that and seeing how that would look like. So that's like next steps essentially, but just trying to doing this reconceptualization and then trying to take it further essentially and seeing what else that gives us, because both fixtures and factors are kind of like, they're kind of at their end station. They're kind of done everything they can. They set up with a certain path, which is cool, but they're kind of at the most of what they can be, I think, which is totally fine. It's just like, but this is kind of where the end of the station is for them, because they're kind of scope around. So this trying to do something different here can give us some new ideas potentially, and then see how we feel about them. That's kind of my take. Cool. What's all this stuff here? I don't know what these are. Okay. Huh. That's just for testing, I think. Cool. Let's see. Oh, yes, parallel testing. That's what they are, I think. Cool. Lab asset test fixtures. Cool. We need to look at the test helper thing. Pretty simple here. I'm using the parallel test result to test if we support both parallel testing or not for our CI setup, just so we test both modes. And this is it. We're just including Oaken test setup. That's kind of it for the test setup. Cool. Anything else I need to look at? Oh, maybe we should look at the other. Hold on, let me find that. This is a test dummy. We don't want anymore. We could look at the generator too, but it's kind of complex. We're trying to trace, because we're giving this root model in the fixtures, like the account, we can actually trace the rest of the object graph based on that. So this is what this does, but it's kind of, there's a lot of stuff to figure that out. So yeah, this is kind of some of the complex stuff in here to figure this stuff out. But it's just a way to help people. Like I just used it the other day. I'm trying to look at this Ruby video. If anybody's heard of it, somebody else let me know about it. It's like an open source app for Ruby videos, I guess. And one of the people who wrote to me was like, hey, I've been hacking on this thing, but it's using fixtures and it kind of a little bit cumbersome in a way. So I'm looking at trying to see what it would look like to port that to Oaken. And so far it's going sort of well, but I use this as a starting place to help make it a little bit faster to upgrade some of it, and kind of did some of the work. But yeah, I'll need some more attention there. Anyway, let's see here in Oaken. So when you add a new, like the accounts, for instance, it's one of these we're creating. And so when you add those singleton methods on def users.create or something, it's one of these instances we're actually mutating. And here's where we're doing those like defaults. Just like, so anything that you have a column name for, essentially, we're just grabbing from these like global defaults and seeing if you have any of those, and then we'll just use them. Let's see. And some delegation here as well. Those are the like per type defaults here. Here's where we do the create stuff. We're also exploring doing something where you can set these unique by on create calls, which usually in ActiveRecord you can only do that on like the upsert call. But the idea here being if you have a user where what their unique by is actually their email. So we're trying to see, well, if the person exists in the system with that email when you're seeding, we can actually go in and just update that person instead if you have that data. So that's kind of what we're doing here. We're trying to, let me close the pane here. We're trying to see if we have unique by here. And if you pass any of those, like the email address, for instance, we'll actually find it first based on those, and then try to update with the rest of the attributes. Again, may have seen whether or not this is a good idea or whatnot, but it's still a little bit exploring. And then the label here is just taking the name here we gave to expose it on the object so you can actually refer to them and test and things like that. Upsert kind of works a little bit similarly. Label here, I can do some of this call location stuff to find the actual place within the seeds file where you generated the method. Yeah, so that's kind of the gist of it, I guess. And not too bad, I think, in terms of code. It's a lot of setup and so forth, but yeah, cool. Let's see. Cool. Any questions? I know this is like a ton of stuff or whatever, and I like going kind of fast for some of these demos just because I think it's kind of fun to just like traipse through it and see what happens, and hopefully we can follow along and whatnot. It's just mostly just for fun in a way. So yeah, cool.
So I have one, like it
Mhm.
doesn't trigger the ActiveRecord callbacks, right?
Yeah, it does. Yeah,
It does? Okay.
yeah,
So,
it
but
does.
is there a
Actually,
way
come to
that
think of
it
it,
can get like a circular somehow,
I
maybe?
guess
Because the,
suppose maybe, yeah. But you can see here we're
yeah.
using, so type here is just the actual record. So we're calling create here. So we'll end up executing that thing, but we also end up executing the, I guess, the update callback there. If we're calling update, but you can use upsert as well to sidestep that. We're trying to do something a little bit beyond just what, like upsert on an ActiveRecord these days tries to skip a whole bunch of stuff, both callbacks and I think validations as well, because it's trying to be very close to just a database. But we're mostly doing that, but then we're also trying to be like, okay, but let's also validate the record you passed in just to help you set it up correctly so you don't run into some of those like weird bugs down the line or whatever. That's kind of just, but yeah, so you could sidestep callbacks with this, but it's kind of, I don't know, it's not the easiest thing to figure out what everybody wants for these things because their domain is so different and everything. And obviously that's not what you're saying, but I mean in terms of that it should solve everything, but it's just kind of, yeah. So I'm trying to set up some defaults that hopefully make it easier to work with, and then people are gonna make what they're gonna make of it, and then also just looking for more uses in a way to see what they find with it, because I can't fit my way to all the different situations. So it's just, let's see what happens, and then it's gonna be need to be used by more people in a way. So I've been working with a friend of mine. He's the one that's quoted in the README as well. He said this today, actually. I don't know if you could see it here, but it's kind of, anyway, you could find it in README as well as Thomas Cannon. He's been a big proponent of this and be using it in 2 different apps as well, and he's been really happy with it. So I'm really happy that it's working for some people. I still think it remains to be seen how it's going to work for like larger apps, for instance, but at least where I'm at right now, well, I think this is better than the 2 alternatives we have right now, at least for small apps, and then we could always figure out what we could do later on down the line. So that's kind of my take right now. But yeah. Cool.
It
Any other?
definitely
Yeah,
like
go ahead.
makes it, I think, easier to keep in the mind like how the data flows compared to
Yes.
fixtures, at least, especially for me.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. And then, and by the way, this could also be, you could still use this with factories if you wanted to. I
Yeah.
think FactoryBot has a, I think it has like a, I don't quite remember, what's FactoryBot that create, no, wait. I think it's like called attributes for or something. So if you had an account an account factory, I think you could do this and then, wait, hold on. I'm typing when people are looking, put something like this, where you could like combine the two of them or something. You could probably even do, what is it? Do you do include FactoryBot or how do you do the, because it has like shorthand. So maybe you can
Yeah,
even do
something
like
factory
this.
bot syntax, something like that, I think.
Right. Oh, it's syntax. Okay, cool. But then maybe you could even get it down to like this or something, and then you could combine the two of them if you wanted to. So you still could use the FactoryBot stuff that you set up, but then you could still get some of this like stuff pre-seeded in a way. And then that line between what's in a factory and what's in like seeds is also like difficult because I think what people are running into with fixtures is to try to add every edge case to fixtures, which is kind of not what they're there for. What you want is to do something where you have the base case and then you can always mutate like an object in the test because they're wrapped in transactions. So anything you add, create, or update gets rolled back right after the test. So it's safer in that way. And also faster. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Makes sense so far? I hope hope it makes sort of sense. It's like I just tend to like, oh, here's all the context and there's these things and we used to do this and all this stuff. So I hope it makes sense. But yeah. Cool. I think that's kind of what I had to share. Did you do anything? What's the I see. Okay. So, wait, what's that?
No, I can actually ask one more. Like, do you
Yeah.
use the riffing technique for these ones too, or do you keep it more like a domain modeling?
I actually did for the associated optic one. I think I have the original commit. Let's see if we hop back to GitHub. Let's see here. Wait, is that the one? Yeah, it is the one. Hop back to here, and then hop back to here, and then into the, let's see. But yeah, what you're mentioning is I've been doing, we can also look at that actually. Let's look at that. Let's see. Oh wait, that's gonna take a while to get to the last one. Hold on. Maybe not too much. So this is like 2 years ago. I did a lot of this stuff. Let's see. Okay. So what I've been doing is, let's maybe find that as well. I don't think I have it on my riffing on Rails. So what I've been also doing is, I don't think that was mentioned in the, let me put this in the chat as well. I don't think this was mentioned in, what is all
Yeah,
this
no,
stuff?
we didn't.
Yeah, no, but we didn't talk about that either. But what I've been working on as well is this like technique for domain modeling essentially. And you can see a bunch of examples in here. And there's also a YouTube video some YouTube videos down below with some sessions as well. And there's also a RailsConf talk. I don't think I've even updated this with where the RailsConf talk is. I was on the bike set as well and talk about some of the stuff you were curious about, all that stuff. But the idea is that you're essentially opening up a blank Ruby file and tossing in some Ruby code into that. So this is just what it looks like. Again, you don't necessarily need to write class user inherits from application record to know that it's an active record. You can kind of use the same DSL to sort of build up, oh, this user has many playlists and it has one history and so forth. And you can start building out your object graph kind of like that. So there's a YouTube video for this thing, for instance. So you can see in the repo for how we actually did this. And it takes us like 40 minutes. And I think we talk about it for 15 minutes afterwards, me and Jeremy Smith, a friend of mine. So I've been doing this sort of technique for a while where I'm just tossing things around and have sort of an idea for something and seeing what it looks like and sketching some code out because Ruby is really great at that. This is kind of pretty close to standard Ruby. You know, it would need some extra stuff to not break on a syntax error here, but you know, you get the idea across. So that's what I did with this original sketch in here. I think that was, yeah, in April in 2022. So I was working on coming up with the idea and trying to prove it out and added some things in the console or whatnot. And then I just took the sketch and then committed it straight in here and then started working on it some more to iterate on it. You can see this is kind of what it looked like at first. I guess I just implemented aware directly and I was like, oh, wait, maybe you could simplify, but yeah. Yeah, the base of the idea was there essentially. What is this stuff? Oh, I was trying to do, oh yeah, I completely forgot about this. This was something else that did not work, so I had to yank this out. But what was I going for there? Oh yeah, while we're loading. Oh, okay. It was actually trying to do something similar to what I'm doing in Oaken, but it did not work. Trying to use those singleton methods to also be able to add stuff to the record as we're loading the associated object, but it kind of didn't work. So maybe we should actually pick that up again. I'm not sure. That maybe that'll be interesting. I'm not sure. Anyway, cool. Cool. Yeah. I think I could actually make this work now. That's okay. I need to look at that. Okay, okay, cool. But yeah, I used the riffing thing for this just to try to swap things around and see what it looks like. And oh, can this work? Because I had the idea for doing the credits and the global ID integration, because then we could work with jobs and so forth. So that was the core of it. I think, yeah, cool. So that's kind of a lot of stuff to throw at everybody. So I hope it makes sense. Again, if there's any questions, we could deal with them and talk about them and so forth.
I think then we are done, I guess, like if no one has any additional questions or okay. Then well, thank you, Kasper, for joining us. It was like
Thanks so much. Yeah.
really great to have you.
Yeah, this is cool. Yeah.
Hopefully, like we can do it maybe some other time, like when you have another talk or like try to get ready. I think this is like really
Yeah.
great way to learn too.
Yeah, I tend
And
to
that
just toss people into the deep end and be like, well, see, it's not that deep, but sometimes people can be a little bit like, wait. But at least I feel like it's because I think sometimes what people do when like looking at Rails code itself on Rails or something, they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. And just click stuff and then you'll figure it out kind of. And just if you can only be 5% of the file, well, then you can only be 5% of the file, but at least you read those 5%. And you can start building up from there. That's kind of what I did. Otherwise it just becomes like, oh, I'm not good enough for doing it. Okay, but then when are you going to be that way? It's just clicking stuff and just looking at stuff. It's all good, essentially. Yeah. But yeah, I can sometimes be a little bit like, yeah, here's this stuff, but here's the stuff, and which has its charm, I think. But yeah. Yeah. Cool.
yeah. And do you have anything to say, or shall we wrap it up?
Yeah, thank you, Kasper, for everything. And it was a great talk. So I guess I can stop the recording.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Yeah.